Well, folks, thanks so much for your interest in this topic today. I'm excited that we've taken the wraps off of Calgary 2026's plan. I think that what we see is that a ton of work has been done, and a ton of very thoughtful, very pragmatic work has been done. So I was really interested in the tenor of the questions today, and I will be very interested to see what Council chooses to do when we finish our conversation.
You mentioned that you were not very much in favor of this mid-sized arena. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the nice thing about this, what we have to remember is that the IOC, not just the IOC, but we always knew that we have actually plenty of ice facilities in Calgary now to be able to host the Olympics. It's nicer to be able to get more fans in the room, and so where this idea of the 5,000 seat arena really came from, it's not that we need a 5,000 seat arena, it's just that more people get to watch it live. And so my argument is, you know, there's ongoing discussions around a new larger arena. If that goes through, then we won't need the 5,000 seat. If that doesn't go through, then I would prefer to have a discussion about whether we need to build a brand new 5,000 seat arena or we go into a slightly smaller existing facility, which would still work for what is required. But you know what? While it is exciting to talk about the venues today, that is so much subject to change. And as you look at previous Olympic bids, the venue plans changed quite significantly, even after the bid was awarded. So I imagine that those are conversations that will start today now that we've got that first draft out, but they are conversations that will continue.
Sir, it seems like the ballpark figure for a city contribution would be about $500 million. Can that much money be contributed to this over that time frame without raising property taxes?
Yeah, we very rarely use property taxes for capital funds. Now, I don't know if that number is finally an accurate number, but let's play with it if it is. So if it's about $500 million, we should realize that is over an 8 or 9 year period. And the biggest chunk of that would be a fieldhouse. And we already have a fieldhouse on our books that we're looking for funding sources for over $300 million, which is a facility that is badly needed. So the actual difference, if you think about it that way, let's use $500 million just for argument's sake. That means that the city would be putting in $200 million, and in return, would be getting several billion dollars of capital infrastructure. It's a pretty good deal.
So as a leveraging exercise.
Yeah, it's a huge leveraging exercise, exactly.
Versus the cost that the city might face at the Olympics.
Yeah, so if you think about it this way, when you look at the facility costs, ballpark figure to renovate those legacy facilities if Calgary still wants to be a Winter Games powerhouse as we've been for so long. We've hosted well over 100 World Cup events in recent times. So that's $500 million to renovate those facilities that are coming on 40 years old. You add to that the need for a field house, that's $300 million, which we have to do. That's been on our capital list for a long time. That's $800 million that kind of has to be spent anyway. And if we can get that money from other places and also get all the benefits of the Olympic Games, that starts to sound really interesting to me.
Were there any surprises in the room, or did the sort of debate
See, we were lucky because we got a briefing on it last week. So,
but as you expected, did it go as expected?
Yeah, it was pretty much as expected. And you know, I know a lot of people have been focusing on the marginal issues here around the arena, around where's curling going to be. And the argument that I've really been making is, you know, we've got like 90% of the draft plan in place now, and I really want to think about that. And the question that council has to ask itself today is there enough information here to go to the people and let the people decide in a plebiscite? And based on what I've heard today, I certainly think that with the exception of the piece on the actual share from the provincial government, we're ready to go to a plebiscite. And the province has promised that they will come forward with those provincial members in plenty of time for the vote.
Was it a mistake not to do the public consultation first?
You know, I don't actually agree with that. I know that one of my colleagues has been saying that, oh, we haven't done any public consultation. I would suspect that there has actually been more conversation about this topic than anything we do at the city. And that's been going on for 24 months. So yeah, maybe we haven't had formal, you know, trifolds like a science fair where people can come and look at it, but there has been an enormous amount of engagement. I don't think the public would say that they are not engaged in this discussion. And by the way, the single best thing you can do for engagement, let people vote.
Right. En français is the last question, please, then we need to get going.
I think what you meant to say is, c'est la dernière question.
C'est la dernière question.
Donc, votre réaction devant le budget qui est présenté aujourd'hui?
Je crois que c'est vraiment un budget qui pour moi, est juste et que tous les citoyens de Calgary peuvent faire une décision.
So there were numerous votes, sir. Bottom line on all this is the Olympic project continues.
Here we go. So what you saw today, the critical vote was the vote on number 3, which passed 10-5, which really was a continuation of the work and an endorsement, more or less, of the numbers that you saw today in a negotiating framework as we move forward with the other orders of government.
Why is that more critical than having a plebiscite? Please explain.
Well, the way the vote was done is the plebiscite vote was a freebie. So politicians had the opportunity to go, yay, I want to listen to the people, but I'm not actually going to do the work to get them the information they need. Fundamentally, it was a bit of a freebie. But you know, at the same time, I wanted to make sure that council members who really wanted to say, look, I don't like the way these numbers are going, had the opportunity to make that vote. So that's why we did it that way.
You didn't weigh in this time. Your reaction to how things went, it seems like there was a little more support for putting it forward as there was at the last offering.
Yeah, so it's interesting because that's why the critical vote was the 3rd vote, because in fact we have gone from a 9-6 to a 10-5 on moving forward now. That could change, but what I also heard from a lot of people was that they will respect the will of the people in the plebiscite. There is one important caveat, and I've said from the very beginning that I am not as much pro-Olympics as I am pro a great deal for Calgary, and that deal has to be great. So if there is a point where that great deal just is not surfacing before or even after the plebiscite, if the plebiscite passes, then certainly council would still say, you know, this isn't right for the citizens of Calgary and we're going to pull out of the process.
And yeah, they were like, just to expand on that, that was a clarification that Councillor Farrell brought up too, that if the city votes for it, you guys still have the right to pull out after if agreements fail or numbers don't come through.
Yeah, the difference is right now is that there are no more formal off-ramps. You know, we had all these reporting periods to council where we would bring a report to council and say, do you still want to go forward? Do you still want to go forward? Those are done now. So now the only big ramp is the plebiscite. Plebiscite fails, of course, we'll stop. I can't imagine council not following the will of the people. Plebiscite passes, then there won't be more reports to council, do you want to move forward, do you want to move forward? But there will still be an opportunity for our negotiating team, for the city secretariat or for BIDCO to come back and say, it's not working.
How big of a concern would a narrow margin be in the plebiscite to continue?
That's a really good hypothetical. You know, it really depends on what the discussion was. And if the discussion really focused on a couple of issues where the bid could be improved and it was a narrow victory, I imagine that we would look at those issues to see how it could be improved. If there was a narrow loss, that's probably just a loss.
Is there a threshold you'd like to see, 50% plus 1, for example?
You know, we've talked about this so much, and of course 50% plus 1, you got to go with that, because otherwise you're saying no to the majority. But if it's 50% plus 1, but everyone's saying, you know what, we really, really, really want curling to be an Airdrie, and that would make us happier, then we might look at doing that.
Do you think Calgarians should
Mayor of Airdrie, Peter Brown, that was just a hypothetical.
do you think people should be less hung up on the venue plan and pay more attention to the numbers?
I think both are really important and both are likely to change. On the venue plan, it will change. I guarantee you that it will change over time a little bit, but 80% of it is there. You know, the critical thing in the venue plan, the most important thing in the venue plan is the ski jumping, which is a very small sport at Whistler, not at Wingsport. And actually, that's really it. That's the biggest issue in the venue plan that was sorted versus what people were talking about before. You know, I know earlier today in sort of the group thing, people were like, "Oh, it's all about arena." Okay, there was never an arena. There was never an NHL arena in this. I've stood in front of these microphones so many times and said that the bid will go forward with or without an NHL arena. So that's really not the issue here. The venue plan is pretty similar. On the numbers, I can't emphasize enough that these are incredibly conservative numbers. These are very high expenses and very low revenues, as Mary Moran told us today. So you should look at the numbers and understand that we have been really conservative about this. And let's be clear, the City of Calgary is unbelievably good in the last 9 years at bringing projects in on time and on budget. We're among the best in the world at it. And so, when people say everything else went over budget, well, that's because people changed things or they couldn't manage the construction. We know how to do both. And so I'm very confident that those expense numbers are pretty much as high as they'll ever be.
Is it a tougher?
Still factor into this?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So if in fact there is a new arena, that actually makes the numbers look better in many ways. And the most important thing is if there's a new arena, it just allows for more people to come and see it live, because you could move things like some curling matches. Curling's a bad example. Let's say some men's hockey matches, you could move from a small arena to a bigger arena, because in Calgary all the hockey matches are going to sell out. So that's really the advantage of it. So should that move forward, and we've got the money for it, then that actually just makes the project look better.
Last
I know
question.
that fieldhouse supporters are out there, but is it
So many of them.
Is it a tougher sell, though, in the minds of Calgarians if you don't have a signature legacy piece like something the magnitude of an NHL size?
Well, no, that fieldhouse is really important. And to be able to build, because remember what the fieldhouse is. It's a FIFA arena. It's for soccer, 12 months of the year. It'll have tons of seats in it. It's for track and field. It's really a multi-sport fieldhouse that's a very big deal and would be a huge legacy. But again, this is not an Olympics that's about building legacy. This is not Sochi. It's not even Pyeongchang. And I've been clear about that from the beginning, that this is a very Canadian approach. It's frugal, it's cost effective, and it'll still be extraordinary.